When a forgotten vault at Kensington Palace was accidentally accessed during renovations, a chain of events was set in motion that would rattle the very foundation of the royal family. Among decades-old paperwork and dust-covered boxes lay a sealed document stamped with a royal seal, addressed directly to Catherine, Princess of Wales. What it revealed would change everything. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began, as these things often do, with something utterly mundane, a broken floor tile during a routine electrical overhaul. Beneath it, the workmen discovered a narrow shaft leading to a previously undocumented chamber. At first, it seemed to be a forgotten utility room, until they noticed the faded gold trim on a wooden box buried beneath old blankets. When the royal archivists arrived, they immediately recognized the red wax seal, pressed with a crest one that hadn't been used since the reign of King George VI. But what drew gasps wasn't the seal. It was the name written boldly across the envelope, for Her Royal Highness Catherine. That single line shattered every known protocol. The letter, dated 1987, predated Catherine's royal life entirely. Initial confusion turned to hushed panic as staff scrambled to understand how a document so old and so clearly deliberate could reference a woman who wasn't even part of the royal orbit at the time. The palace aides, trained to maintain discretion in even the strangest of circumstances, were suddenly adrift. Whispers started to swirl. How could this letter exist, and why was it never logged into the official archive? Catherine was informed immediately. According to one insider, she didn't react with alarm, but with quiet intensity. She requested the document be delivered to her in private, away from any prying eyes or speculative commentary. Those closest to her said she locked the doors, lit a candle, and opened the seal with trembling fingers. The envelope was thick, filled not only with a letter, but something weightier that shifted as she held it. But before she could even begin reading, a sense of unease settled over Kensington. Within hours, the palace corridors buzzed with speculation. Had something been hidden from the monarchs themselves? Why Catherine and not Camilla, Anne, or even Princess Beatrice, who held deeper generational ties? Some dismissed it as a prank, others as an old tradition meant to pass through royal women. But the tone shifted when a senior royal aide quietly confirmed the document's legitimacy. It was real, it was ancient, and it was meant for Catherine alone. Security around Catherine's quarters was heightened. She reportedly didn't speak to anyone for nearly 2 hours after reading the file. And when she emerged, she was pale, distant, and carrying something clutched tightly in her hands. That night, a light remained on in her office until the early hours, a subtle signal, but one that many royal staff have come to associate with major personal decisions. Whatever she had read, it had altered something within her. The very next morning, meetings were cancelled, and Catherine requested access to deeper royal records files that even Prince William had never requested before. But the calm didn't last long, for once Catherine opened the letter, the royal silence would shatter. Buried beneath layers of formality was a message that struck like lightning, a personal directive from the late Queen Elizabeth herself. This was no routine letter. It named Catherine as the sole custodian of a centuries-old royal tradition, one so guarded, even Charles had never dared to speak of it. The moment Catherine began to read, the room changed. Every line carried weight. The letter, written in Queen Elizabeth's unmistakable hand, was dated just weeks after Prince William introduced Catherine to her inner circle at Balmoral. It was clear that the late Queen had seen something not just in Catherine's bearing, but in her essence. The Queen didn't speak in vague platitudes. Her words were sharp, commanding, and final. She referenced a tradition not known to the public or even most royals, the matriarchal continuum, a sacred rite that passed through women of regal integrity, not birthright. It was a continuum designed to ensure the monarchy's endurance when the male line faltered in vision or judgment. Elizabeth's phrasing was deliberate. She wrote, "You are the last confirmed heir to this trust. No one else must inherit it." Those words pierced through the centuries of royal protocol, cutting past ceremony and privilege. It wasn't an invitation, it was a command. And it came with the heavy implication that others, perhaps even those sitting on thrones or wearing crowns, were never meant to carry this legacy forward. Catherine, who had been introduced to royal life cautiously, now stood as the chosen guardian of a secret tradition rooted in female sovereignty, unspoken, unchallenged, and unbreakable. The Queen's words hinted at conflicts she foresaw. Subtle references to storms within the house and ambition hidden behind loyalty cast shadows on certain figures in the royal fold. The most shocking of all was a statement that Charles had never been given a copy of this letter. Not in his coronation briefings, not in his decades of preparation. It had been held separately, shielded from even the heir apparent. The implication was explosive. Elizabeth had intentionally bypassed her own son to ensure the continuity of a spiritual authority. He didn't trust others to uphold, and she had done so quietly, methodically planting her directive like a seed waiting to bloom under Catherine's stewardship. Catherine, stunned by the responsibility now placed upon her, reportedly read the letter 3 times before locking it away. What gripped her wasn't just the trust, but the timing. Elizabeth had predicted her strength long before the world acknowledged it. She hadn't waited for Catherine to earn her title through time or headlines. She had already seen it, written it, and sealed it in a vault, buried beneath years of dust and silence. And now, that silence was gone. And yet, it wasn't the letter alone that shook the House of Windsor. It was what came next, hidden in a locked compartment beneath the parchment. As Catherine lifted the bottom layer of the document folder, her hands trembled. Beneath lay an artifact no one had seen in over a century, the Codex Regina. Its existence had been denied for decades, dismissed as royal folklore. But now, it was undeniably real, and it bore her name. Bound in faded velvet and secured with a clasp etched in Latin, the Codex Regina radiated a quiet power. This was not merely a historical curiosity. It was a living testament, one that carried within it the weight of queens who had ruled not with swords or titles, but with unseen authority. As she opened it, the first pages revealed notes in Queen Victoria's unmistakable cursive, carefully documenting rights of succession and the matriarchal lineage no modern royal had dared speak of. Flipping further, Queen Mary's annotations were visible, written in firmer, sterner script, commentary, corrections, and warnings laced through each section like threads of a secret doctrine. The deeper Catherine read, the clearer the truth became. This was the monarchy's unspoken heart, the sacred tradition of women who anchored the throne. Not through marriage, but through myth and moral compass. And there, nestled between pages pressed with pressed violets and royal crests, was a thin sheet of parchment. A name, written in thick ink, Catherine Elizabeth. The shock wasn't just the presence of her name, it was the date beneath it. It predated her marriage. It even predated her engagement. This wasn't prophecy, this was planning. She had been chosen long before she even understood the weight of her future. The implications unraveled her. Someone, perhaps multiple sovereigns, had conspired to place her on this path, not out of affection, but out of necessity. This wasn't destiny, this was design. Further in, the Codex spoke of the anchor of the bloodline, a figure described in hushed tones throughout royal legend. A woman tasked with preserving the continuity of honor and restraint when others faltered. The anchor did not rule, but she guarded. She did not command, but she ensured that no crown turned tyrant. The role was symbolic, spiritual, but fiercely protected, passed quietly between generations through ritual, secrecy, and blood. And now it had passed to her. Confirmation of this transfer was embedded not in ink alone, but in relic. Small, carefully preserved strands of hair from monarchs past were sewn into the inner cover. Victoria, Elizabeth, even whispers of Matilda. It was haunting, reverent, and absolute. To possess the Codex was to inherit more than authority, it was to carry every oath, every betrayal, every sacrifice made in silence. As she closed the cover, Catherine knew the burden was irreversible. What was once myth was now mission, and she, the unwitting heir, had stepped into a role others had long fought to keep buried. But word spread quickly beyond Kensington, and not everyone celebrated Catherine's rise. When Queen Camilla learned of the Codex, her reaction was swift. and far from regal. Palace insiders describe a shaking fury as Camilla demanded a full investigation, believing Catherine's claim was forged. What followed was an intense standoff between two royal women, one crowned, the other chosen. Within hours of the Codex Regina's revelation, Camilla summoned her private advisors. The response was immediate and aggressive. Accusations began to swirl through Buckingham's gilded halls, with Camilla's aides quietly suggesting that Kensington had manipulated or misinterpreted ancient royal documents. They hinted that the entire ordeal was a calculated maneuver, an orchestrated attempt by Catherine's circle to elevate her beyond her place in the royal hierarchy. For Camilla, the implications were more than symbolic. The Codex didn't just honor Catherine's spiritual authority, it subtly undermined Camilla's very position. If this centuries-old rite held any legal or ancestral weight, then Camilla's influence, carefully built over decades, could collapse in an instant. The tension between the two women, long simmering beneath layers of public diplomacy, now erupted behind closed doors. According to one witness present during a senior family briefing, Camilla's voice could be heard from 2 rooms away as she demanded an emergency review of all royal archives. She insisted the royal legal team scrutinize every page of the Codex, as well as the letter from Queen Elizabeth calling the documents questionable in origin and intent. But Catherine, calm and deliberate, did not flinch. She stood by the Codex's authenticity, refusing to allow it to be seized or redacted. That refusal only deepened the rift. Then came a moment no one expected. Prince William, usually the model of restraint, publicly voiced his support for Catherine's claim. In a meeting that included Charles, Camilla, and senior aides, he stated clearly that if Queen Elizabeth had chosen to act outside the traditional channels, it was because she foresaw exactly this resistance. His declaration marked the first time he openly challenged Camilla's authority, and insiders say it left the room in stunned silence. The Queen Consort was no longer dealing with a passive daughter-in-law. She now faced a united front. Reports from inside a family dinner days later painted a dramatic scene. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken grievances. Then the dam broke. A shouting match erupted between Catherine and Camilla, each refusing to back down. Charles, caught in the middle, was said to be visibly torn, unable to reconcile his roles as father, husband, and king. He reportedly left the room mid-argument, retreating into the adjacent chamber without a word. What had once been a controlled internal matter was now a battle of succession, legacy, and power, unfolding in the very heart of the monarchy. But Camilla's resistance would be met with something even more powerful than the Codex, a voice from the past with chilling clarity. Then came the tape, a cassette tucked inside a faded envelope marked to be played when the time is right. In the recording, Queen Elizabeth's voice emerges with a solemn calm, addressing Catherine directly, praising her virtue, warning of betrayal, and sealing her claim in the monarch's own voice. There was a hush when the tape was first played. Catherine, flanked only by a trusted archivist and her private secretary, sat motionless as the voice of the late Queen filled the room. It wasn't just a message, it was a haunting validation. Elizabeth's tone was firm, tinged with something deeper than formality. There was affection, there was gravity, and most of all, there was warning. "Catherine," the voice began, "you are both balm and steel, and when the house begins to tremble, you must stand where others sway." Those words cut through the fog of doubt that had gripped the palace. For every claim Catherine had made, for every suspicion Camilla had hurled, the Queen herself had offered confirmation. Not in writing alone, but in her own unmistakable voice. The Queen spoke of factions within our house, clearly aware of rifts yet to fully reveal themselves. "Some will not accept this," she continued. "They will see your rise not as destiny, but as disruption." The message was both intimate and apocalyptic, a monarch preparing her spiritual successor for storms that would follow her death. Elizabeth did not mince words. She openly acknowledged that Charles had not been informed. It was not his burden to carry. His path is separate. That sentence, more than any, revealed the depth of the Queen's orchestration. She had deliberately withheld knowledge of the Codex from her son, not out of cruelty, but to protect what she believed would be the monarchy's final safeguard, Catherine. But the most staggering line came when the Queen turned her attention to Camilla. Her presence is temporary but necessary, she said, with an almost surgical detachment. It wasn't cruel, it was calculated. Elizabeth had foreseen Camilla's influence and accepted it as a momentary stabilizer, not a future matriarch. This distinction redefined the current power dynamics in ways that could not be ignored. Camilla, whose authority rested heavily on public acceptance and royal proximity, had just been reframed as a transitional figure in a much older plan, one that bypassed her entirely. And then, as the recording neared its end, Elizabeth's tone changed. It softened, but the message deepened. "When others falter, preserve dignity," she said, "even when surrounded by indignity. That is your inheritance." The silence after that line was suffocating. But the Queen wasn't finished. Her Fina. L words echoed like a riddle carved in stone. When the crown splits, hold the scepter steady. No one in that room knew exactly what it meant, not yet. But its power was undeniable. It wasn't a warning, it was a command. A prophecy sealed in audio, meant for one woman alone. And as the family processed this prophetic message, another storm loomed, this time from within the House of York. Princess Eugenie's decision to break her silence shocked everyone. Stepping into the fray, she openly backed Catherine's claim, and in doing so, shattered years of quiet compliance. Her move not only outraged Camilla but also ignited whispers of a new royal alliance rising under the radar. The Yorks had long walked a careful tightrope, close enough to the throne to matter, distant enough to avoid its battles. But that silence ended when Eugenie, known for her discretion, stood before a confidential gathering of senior aides and declared what few dared to say aloud: "The Codex Regina is real, I've seen it." Her admission wasn't vague. She spoke of stumbling upon it as a child while wandering the lesser-known halls of the Royal Archive. At the time, it had meant nothing to her. But now, with its significance laid bare and Catherine at the center of its legacy, her memory returned with chilling clarity. And so, with courage that blindsided the establishment, she chose a side, Catherine's, in a statement shared discreetly with royal correspondents. Eugenie wrote that she believed in a modern monarchy, guided by authenticity, not ambition. Her words struck like thunder. They weren't merely supportive, they were an indictment. The palace, already cracking under the weight of Catherine's claim, now faced internal fracture. Beatrice, caught in the middle, remained silent, her neutrality creating a quiet schism between the once inseparable sisters. It was a divide that reflected something larger, a generational shift, no longer willing to abide by inherited loyalties. Camilla, incensed, turned her fury toward Prince Andrew, demanding he intervene and bring his daughter to heel. But Andrew, weakened by scandal and keen to avoid further controversy, declined to interfere. Behind palace walls, the Yorks began organizing quiet, strategic meetings with Catherine. These weren't political gatherings. They were personal affirmations, moments of solidarity. In whispered corridors and behind locked doors, something ancient stirred once more, the sense of unity that had defined the queens of old. Catherine, cautious but resolute, accepted Eugenie's support, not for power but for the preservation of something deeper, the integrity of the house itself. Camilla viewed it differently. To her, Eugenie's declaration was betrayal, treachery, cloaked in youth and idealism. She began to see shadows in every conversation, threats in every glance. Trust evaporated, allies grew distant, and still Catherine remained composed, guided now not by reaction, but by something greater, conviction. The movement that had started in silence was beginning to roar, and just when the palace thought the worst had passed, a buried clause in the Codex would ignite a firestorm that no one could control. One clause, one sentence. That's all it took to end Camilla's moral authority. Hidden within the Codex was a clause explicitly excluding any unratified consort from ever bearing the matriarchal seal, a role Camilla had unofficially assumed for years. The room went still. Camilla's face, witnesses said, drained to ghost white. Buried near the end of the Codex, where few would have thought to look, was a section titled "On Disputed Succession and Disqualified Heirs." It was arcane in language, thick with the tone of eras past, but its meaning was unmistakable. Drawn directly from Prissé, dent set during Queen Alexandra's time, The clause barred any spouse or partner not directly confirmed by the reigning monarch through matriarchal lineage rights from holding symbolic or ceremonial authority over the bloodline. And more critically, it explicitly disqualified any consort whose marriage was not sanctified through the traditional matriarchal seal, a ritual quietly performed for generations, yet suspended during Camilla's union with Charles. It didn't matter how modern the monarchy had become. According to the Codex, Camilla was never meant to bear the weight of maternal sovereignty. Her crown, her influence, all of it was symbolic at best, void at worst. Catherine, though clearly shaken by the document's severity, did not gloat. She remained silent, letting the words speak for themselves. Camilla, however, erupted. She demanded the Codex be denounced, declared illegitimate, and removed from all royal consideration. She called the language outdated, manipulated, and malicious. But the Codex was authentic. The Queen herself had confirmed it, in writing and on tape. Denial now would mean denying Elizabeth's final wish, a move so dangerous, so unprecedented, that not even Charles could bring himself to support it. Instead, he said nothing. The Privy Council was hastily summoned, tasked with advising on the clause's implications. Divisions immediately emerged. While several long-serving members leaned toward modernizing interpretations, a notable faction argued for upholding tradition, pointing to the Codex's role in sustaining monarchy during previous crises. And at the center of it all stood Catherine, not lobbying, not begging, simply existing as the woman chosen by history's hidden hands. She hadn't fought for this. It had found her. As internal battles raged, the world outside the palace gates caught wind of the storm. Media outlets began circling like hawks, and whispers turned to headlines. Royal watchers noticed Camilla's absence from scheduled appearances. Rumors leaked of confrontations, tears, ultimatums behind closed doors. And still, Catherine said nothing publicly. She didn't need to. The clause had spoken. History had chosen. Charles, faced with a moment that demanded clarity, remained hauntingly still. He neither defended his wife nor discredited the Codex. His silence was deafening. For some, it was cowardice. For others, it was surrender. But for Catherine, it was confirmation the old order was crumbling and the tide had turned. But while Camilla reeled, the world began to watch, and the monarchy faced its most public unraveling in decades. As headlines blared and opinion polls exploded, the public made their stance known. Catherine, not Camilla, represented the heart of the monarchy. From candle-lit vigils outside Kensington to historic op-eds in international papers, the people rallied not just for a princess, but foe. The future queen they already saw in her. The response was unlike anything the palace had seen in decades. What began as hushed intrigue over the Codex had erupted into a full-blown public reckoning. Social media campaigns under hashtags like #TrueHeirCatherine and #SealOfTheQueen began trending globally, with millions sharing clips of the late Queen's voice from the recovered tape, drawing their own lines between duty, legacy, and love. Petitions flooded Parliament urging the Royal Council to formally recognise Catherine as the rightful matriarchal successor. The Crown, once impenetrable, now stood face to face with its people, and the people had made their choice. What stunned the establishment most was the diversity of support. Traditional royalists, once hesitant about Catherine's growing role, now hailed her as a symbol of stability and continuity. Modern voices praised her for embodying the quiet strength the monarchy desperately needed. Scholars, church leaders, and former diplomats all weighed in, not merely to speculate on palace politics, but to publicly declare that the Codex and the Queen's directive must be honoured. And through it all, Catherine remained poised, offering no statement, granting no interviews, and yet somehow commanding the moment without ever speaking a word. Camille Allay's public appearances, once filled with royal pomp, began to sour. Crowds that once politely cheered now fell eerily silent. Some turned their backs. At a charity event in York, murmurs spread that staff had been instructed to avoid mentioning Catherine's name. Still, the silence screamed louder than any headline. Camilla's grip on symbolic authority was slipping not just in private chambers, but now, unmistakably, on the streets of Britain, bar in C. The palace, however, A moment quietly took shape, one that would never be televised, but would be remembered by those who witnessed it. Princess Anne, the ever-stoic stalwart of the crown, requested a private audience with Catherine. No aides, no press, just the two women. What occurred behind those closed doors remained between them, but the result was unmissable. Anne was later seen leaving Kensington with glistening eyes and a firm nod, a subtle but seismic gesture of approval. Days later, during a Windsor walkabout, Prince Edward reportedly brushed aside questions about the Codex with a rare smile, simply saying, "There's more to strength than what we wear on our heads." That comment alone sent shockwaves through royal watchers. The tide had not only turned, it was rushing in Catherine's direction. Calls began emerging to formally review the process of matriarchal recognition, a conversation that had been dormant for generations. It wasn't just about Catherine anymore. It was about the future of the institution itself. Was it time to finally separate ceremonial titles from spiritual authority? Was it time to let the people's will reflect the monarchy's path forward? But the final twist came not from the people or the palace, but from the king himself. In a moment both tragic and transformative, King Charles summoned both women. The atmosphere was electric, heavy with decades of suppressed emotion. With trembling hands, Charles offered his judgment, one that would reshape the monarchy forever. "There can only be one matriarch," he declared. And then he turned to Catherine. The meeting took place behind heavily guarded palace doors, but details leaked almost instantly. For days, Charles had remained quiet, walking the palace gardens alone, avoiding both confrontation and commitment. But now he had made his decision not as a husband, not even as a father, but as sovereign. As he sat across from Catherine and Camilla, the gravity of his words hung in the air. He began not with defense, but with admission. He confessed that he had no knowledge of the Codex, no awareness of the letter his mother had written, and no idea that such a directive had existed, locked away from him for decades. The room reportedly went still, the silence broken only by Charles's wavering breath as he continued. "But I heard her voice, and I know her intent." It was then that he turned to Camilla, the woman who had stood by him through scandal and scorn, who had been crowned at his side. His words, though softened by respect, were devastating in their clarity. "Your role remains cherished," he said, "but the authority my mother passed on belongs elsewhere." He asked her, not demanded, to step back from all internal advisory roles related to legacy, family structure, and long-term dynastic planning. Her duties would remain ceremonial, her public presence honored. But within the walls of power, a new figure would rise. Camilla, reportedly stunned, sat motionless. Her protest never came. It didn't need to. The decision had already eclipsed any argument. Charles then turned to Catherine, and for the first time in her life she was addressed not as princess, nor as consort, but as matriarch in authority. The term was unfamiliar, but it carried weight. It was a public recognition of what had been quietly ordained by Queen Elizabeth and echoed by generations before her. Royal protocol was to be immediately updated. Catherine would be granted final influence over ceremonial heirlooms, archival oversight, and matters of family legacy, traditionally left unspoken but long held in the hands of women who shaped the crown's soul more than its structure. The decision did not erase the pain. It did not mend every wound. But as Catherine rose from her seat, witnesses said there was a shift not just in title but in energy. She didn't leave the room empowered by status. She walked out bearing the weight of history, the scars of struggle, and the silent expectation of a nation desperate for direction. In that moment, she became more than a royal. She became the embodiment of endurance. The matriarch not chosen by chance, but by centuries of whispered fate. The monarchy, once shaken, now stands on a new foundation built not on tradition alone, but on a woman's quiet, relentless rise to power. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.